you can then go and do it more on your own. But to kind of approach it the other way, yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. You really want to get that, that foundation first. I mean, it would be like saying to someone, yeah, I want to go to college, but I really need to get my degree first, and then I'll enroll in my freshman year. It's kind of a backward way of thinking, enroll as your freshman year, and then go through the 4 years and get your degree, and then you'll be an expert in your field, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, because again, I've seen it or heard it many times, and it's just like you said, at the beginning, it's so vital to have that guidance first, so you're safer, and ultimately you're not making avoiding a lot of the mistakes that you might otherwise make if you didn't have a coach, and that way then your progress is that much faster, and again, that much safer. You're not going to hopefully suffer a major setback because maybe you moved wrong and you tweaked something, or worse.
Yeah, agreed. And the other thing that I've also witnessed is maybe it's just I've been lucky enough to work in environments that are generally supportive, but I think most people have been at square one at some point, and they can all kind of relate to what it was like to walk into that class or to that gym for the first time, and how intimidating that can be. And so I think what I've always experienced is that a lot of these classes and gyms are a lot more kind of supportive than I think people kind of give them credit for. And I think once you kind of come in there, I think you'll find that a lot of people that you might be working out with will be very encouraging. Again, they've kind of been there where you are at some point or another. And I've always experienced it to kind of generally be that type of a community. It can be very supportive and encouraging, and I think generally speaking, that's usually what I've witnessed and what I've experienced.
I'll pay you later. That was exactly the topic of the last episode. I don't know. I don't think Brian's had a chance to listen to that one, so I totally didn't tell him to say that. So I wanted to circle back to what we had talked a little bit about earlier when we were talking some Tom Brady and, the GOAT. And that was, you were saying like his approach before when he got injured was the strength training and whatnot. And, just so, again, we're not like confusing folks and everything. So I, spent several episodes already like talking about the importance of strength training and why you need it, just to be clear that, hey, that's not going to necessarily hurt you. We got to do it. We got to, just like the medicine or the, going to the pharmacy, we got to make sure we have the right dose. Yep. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's definitely not to take anything away from strength training. Strength training is absolutely a crucial part of a fitness program and of what I would call physical health. But I guess what I was, in referring to Tom Brady, it's really the idea that we also need to have a balance of our physical health. And
absolutely, yeah.
And so I've kind of come up with this idea that our physical health is kind of resting on four pillars. The four pillars of physical health, in my opinion, are mobility, core control, strength or power, or strength and power, and then the fourth one being cardiovascular conditioning. And I think the ideal situation is to have a fair balance of those four pillars. So if someone's only focusing on strength and power training, but they're lacking mobility or cardiovascular conditioning, then their pillars are out of balance, and that could potentially leave them at risk for injury. At the same time, someone who tends to be overly focused on, let's say, mobility. Yoga is very popular right now. Again, you could be extraordinarily flexible, but if you lack the strength to complement that, that could also keep you out of balance, leaving you susceptible to injury. It's funny to me that somehow yoga has been equated with this idea that if you do yoga, somehow you're not going to get injured. And to some degree, there's truth to that. But I think you could say the same thing for strength training. But it really does kind of come back down to that idea of balance. And then again, same thing for cardiovascular fitness. I think a lot of adult, active adults tend to have a strong focus on cardiovascular fitness, a lot of running and things of that nature. You walk into most gyms, you see a lot of people grinding away on elliptical machines and treadmills, and the focus tends to be on that cardio piece of it. And it's great to have that cardiovascular fitness, but if you don't have the strength, the mobility, and the core control to complement it, then again, that's out of balance, and that could potentially leave you susceptible to injuries. So, yeah, I think strength training is absolutely an important component. I don't think strength training in and of itself is going to lead to injuries. It's just when you're not in balance. And I think what Tom Brady kind of recognized is that in his 20s that he did not have that balance. He wasn't as focused on his mechanics, on the way his body moved, and there was all that focus on pushing heavy weights. And I think he was, like I said, he was experiencing feeling sore all the time and just always feeling like he was having to drag himself out of bed in the morning because he was sore from the weekend's game or the previous day's workouts. And I think that's when he realized that he needed to do something different if he was going to stay in the sport for a long period of time. And so he's really kind of tried to kind of find this balance of what he does with his workouts so that his body will be healthy. And so that's what I'm really kind of referring to when I kind of refer to Tom Brady, is that idea that it's not just about the strength, it's not just about the mobility. We really want to kind of balance those four pillars.
And yeah, you mentioned, so this is something I've learned a lot about, again, since, working alongside you, is that you mentioned you said core control, but I guess it's what is the other term for it there? Motor control, right?
Motor control, that's
and
right.
Can you just explain to folks what motor control basically is?
Yeah, motor control is an interesting topic, and it's somewhat hard to describe. But basically, if I was going to simplify it, I would say motor control is coordination. Motor control is something that we use a lot when we talk about the core, and I do want to kind of point out, which I tend to point out a lot around here, when I talk about core, I am not talking about your abdominal muscles. Your abdominal muscles are not your core. Your abdominal muscles are just a small part of your core. Your core is really your entire torso, and there are many, many muscles in the torso that make up the core. All of these muscles need to coordinate just right in order to make sure your body moves well. All of our movement, all of the way that we move, the ways we move, all come from proper positioning and proper control of that core. And so when we talk about motor control, we're talking about the ability for those muscles to coordinate and control that core so that you can move well. And so motor control is something that is beyond strength. Motor control is really something that happens on more of a neuromuscular level. It's the coordination of the brain and how it controls the muscles that it has available to it. And so a lot of times when we're talking about motor control or training motor control, we're really not talking about strength training exercises. Again, a good example of that, of motor control, would be, let's take the example of learning how to juggle. So we have someone who wants to learn how to juggle. They've never done it before. We certainly wouldn't approach this person by saying, okay, so in order to juggle, we know we need to bend the elbow. We know we need to move the shoulders. So let's strengthen the bicep and strengthen the deltoids, and then they should be able to juggle. Obviously, they're not going to be able to juggle if we start doing bicep curls.
Right.
Really what it takes is handing that person a ball and teaching them how to throw the ball properly from one hand to the next, and learning that coordination, learning how to do that without really having to watch that ball with your eyes, using the peripheral of your vision as you do that. As that person can kind of throw that ball in a nice arc and easily catch it in the other hand, we would add the second ball. And they would start to practice throwing one ball, and before it reached the other hand, throwing the other ball that was in that hand back to the first hand. And as they get good at that and can do it without really having to watch it, without dropping the balls, we can add the third ball. So this is a good example of motor control, where it really comes down to the ability to coordinate and for your brain to understand how that movement occurs. Motor control oftentimes is something that happens more in the subconscious. It's less the type of thing that we would be really having to think hard about. Although in order to learn a skill in motor control, typically in the beginning it does require a lot of you're using the forefront of your mind in the beginning to learn the maneuver, but then it becomes sort of a habit or second nature, and you don't even have to really think about it. So that generally is what I mean by motor control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think at times I think people get mobility, like a mobility issue, confused with a motor control issue, or vice versa? Right?
Yeah, so that's where we start to get kind of, things get a little complicated. Basically, again, if we assume that there is a proper way to move in anything in life, but if we use the example of a squat as an example, if we agree that there's a correct technique or a proper way to squat, if someone's knee is stiff, that's going to throw off how they squat, and that will demand that they compensate for that lack of mobility at the knee. That throws off the motor control system. Or if they're tight in their hips, same idea. So you really can't fix a motor control problem unless you've identified the potential for a mobility problem. So as the saying goes, don't bring a motor control solution to a mobility problem. You want to fix those mobility problems before you can get into motor control problems.
So it's kind of a matter of learning or relearning the proper movement pattern. So you might be, like going back to the example of squatting, like you might be compensating for some sort of pain or something subconsciously, and then you have to fix that pattern, or maybe it is a mobility issue, but you have to make sure you know which it is first.
Yeah. So again, if someone's got an injury in their knee, or their knee is stiff and it can't bend beyond a certain point, we're not going to be able to fix their squat form if that knee problem still persists. So trying to teach them how to squat more effectively or better with a knee that's stiff and doesn't move well is just not going to happen. They have no choice but to compensate for what's happening at that knee. So if we want to fix their squat form, we first have to identify what's wrong with the squat form to begin with. And if it's a stiff knee, if we can get that knee moving better and restore that knee's mobility, then we can move into training a proper squat technique. And it's kind of funny. I've definitely witnessed over the years this happening in a number of different environments, either with physical therapists or personal trainers, where you've got someone coaching a certain exercise. I guess we'll use the squat again since that's what we're talking about. But they'll say, okay, I want you to squat, and go ahead, and you should be feeling it, in your quads. Do you feel it there? And the person goes, no, I don't feel it there. Okay, well, here, try doing it like this. Do you feel it there now? No, still don't feel it there. And it's like, you can't, like I said, you can't really strengthen your way out of poor technique. You really kind of need to teach the technique first. Once the technique is perfected, then you can expect the person to kind of feel it where they're supposed to feel it, or you'll be able to see them squatting properly. But you're not going to be able to strengthen your way out of that. Or you'll see someone with that lack of mobility in their knee, and the trainer's trying to teach them how to squat more effectively, and they just keep having them squat, expecting at some point it's going to improve and get better. But a lot of times it's recognizing they can't squat because of a mobility issue somewhere. So taking a step away from the squat, fixing the mobility issue, then you can go back and teach the squat and be a lot more successful taking that approach.
Wonderful. Well explained. I appreciate it. So, folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Brian, for being on the show. It's great to have you. Folks, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you again for sharing this journey with me. I am excited for future episodes. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Get strong, live long.